Hello there, welcome back to How to Have a Wedding as Individual as You Are, the podcast. This is a podcast for all engaged couples to help them plan the wedding of their dreams. It's based on my book of the same name and is designed to empower you to really have that special day that means something to you, and maybe cut out a little bit of noise, chatter and opinion from all over the place that seems to pop up when you're planning your dream day. This season I've got all sorts of experts and suppliers lined up to give you loads of tips and inspiration for your special day, from wedding planners to florists to makeup artists to videographers. They're all going to be on board and helping us to create the perfect wedding for you. Today, we're kicking off with a real good friend of the podcast, Emma McNally. Now, if you've listened to seasons 1 and 2, you will know all about Emma. Emma specialises in neuro-linguistic programming, which sounds really deep and heavy, but it's about giving you control over your mind, your emotions, getting rid of lots of thoughts that don't serve you. And I think this is really key when planning your wedding, because it can help you to really focus on who you are and what you want from not just your big day, but your relationship. In this episode, we're talking about identity and that switch from being single or engaged to married life. Now, obviously, it's very exciting and it's the start of your life together, but what does it mean? What are some tools and tricks that you can incorporate into your relationship to make sure that it blossoms and grows beyond the wedding day and you have an amazing rest of your lives together? So after the little jingle, you're going to be listening to me and Emma chat all things identity and marriage. If you find it useful, great. Give this podcast a share and rate it on whatever app you're using to listen right now. And we'll be back every fortnight for the next few months, giving you more and more wedding inspiration. Have fun and enjoy the podcast. Hello Emma, welcome back.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very good, how are you?
Excellent, really good, thank you. Yep.
Cool, so we've got you back for a third time today.
I know, how much fun.
For us, yeah, at least for us. We like it, self-indulgent. So we are talking about identity today.
Indeed.
Sounds very intense and deep, doesn't it?
I know.
You're the expert on all things identity, apparently, no pressure. So what do we mean by identity today?
Yes, okay. So, yeah, I think it's a big thing. We were talking, obviously, before we came on air about, that change of identity when you get married, okay?
Yes.
So suddenly you've gone from single or engaged to married. And a lot of people can find that with a big change like that, they can start to question who they are.
Yeah.
And almost feel like they've lost their own sense of identity.
Mm-hmm,
yeah?
Absolutely.
Their sense of self.
Yes.
Who am I? I'm now part of something else. And
Yeah.
Where does that leave me? So we've done quite a bit of research and some work behind the scenes of looking at this. And actually what we've discovered is that our identity isn't the label that we give ourselves.
Okay.
It's much deeper than that.
Wow.
And so actually when you are moving into a different marital status,
Yes.
sounds very posh, if you are moving into that, actually you are still you underneath.
At the core.
Absolutely. So it's all about the difference between the labels we give ourselves and who we truly are. And all we're having, say all, but it is just a change of label.
Yes. Yeah.
So this real concept, this idea of we get hooked on labels nowadays, don't we? We have
do.
a number of labels for all sorts of different things, which can be helpful, absolutely.
Yeah, they have their uses.
Exactly, but some of them can be less than helpful.
And quite limiting.
Exactly. So, a mum or a wife or a manager, a sister, a brother, they're all just labels.
Yeah.
Who you are, what's important sits underneath that.
Yeah.
And that's what we mean when we talk about identity.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Fantastic.
Cool.
So we should mention that you're the NLP lady.
I am the NLP lady.
Neuro-linguistic programming.
Absolutely.
And you do a course, Identity by Design.
Identity by
which is
Design.
part of NLP. So
Yes,
that's why you're more
absolutely.
than qualified to chat about identity today.
Fabulous.
What about your own experiences of getting married and your identity going from a single woman to an engaged woman to a Mrs.
A Mrs. Absolutely. Well, it was a long time ago to start with. Let's just be clear on that. So it was really interesting because when we got engaged, we weren't engaged for that long.
Okay.
We were only engaged for about 6 months. So, and we'd only been going out just over about 8 months anyway before we got engaged. So it was all a bit of a whistle stop thing. As some of you who've heard my podcast, like the last couple, probably remember I met my husband in a car accident. So yes, so that was the start of the relationship, and it went sort of similar sort of speed, I guess. So the whole engaged, I think because we were getting married so quickly, it was so busy.
Right, okay.
So it was all about the wedding preparation, all about getting everything organised. We were moving house and I was changing job a week before we got married.
So, oh my word.
So we moved 3 months before, and then I changed job 4 days before I left to get married. So so lots happening in that whole world.
Yeah, just a bit.
So I didn't really... I guess appreciate engagement.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it went so quick.
Yeah.
All I remember was I had to buy a fiancé card at Christmas. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was that kind of thing. What did hit me though was the married bit.
Okay.
Because it had gone from all of that noise, all of that busyness. I was living at home and living between places and all sorts of stuff going on, to then suddenly the wedding, the honeymoon, and then back home to the new house where it was like, oh, okay.
What happens now?
What happens now?
Yeah.
Suddenly married, that whole label thing. And this was way before I knew NLP. So it was like, and I'd gone from a house where there was always stuff going on, loads of noise, loads of busyness. And there was just my husband and myself, and he worked shift. And so he was out. And I was like, oh, what do I do now then? How does this work? So the adjustment for me was absolutely huge.
Yeah,
from
massive.
being in a family where my nan used to live there, and my mum and my dad, and always had people and noise
chat to and lots going on.
And I sort of woke up on the first Saturday after we got back, and Sean was at work, and I was like, ooh, okay, it's just me here then.
Wow, that's a huge shock.
It was a big adjustment. It was a huge adjustment, and I now know things from NLP that could have really helped me.
Yeah.
Big time then, because it was, absolutely love Sean, absolutely, but he needed to be there, right?
Well, yeah, it does help.
I was
doesn't
like,
it?
did I miss something at the bottom of the contract, that, about absence, where was that bit in there? So so it was a massive adjustment.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you said there are things you know now that you'd wished you'd known. What are some of those things?
Yeah, so just some practical things, even some non-NLP stuff about support and about having your friends around you, and just sort of, going back to sort of those days when you know that he's not there because he works shifts, and he always has ever since I've known him. So getting used to that pattern of what to do. And I found it over time, but it's almost anticipation. If I'd known, I would have pre-plan some of this stuff and say, right, okay, girly weekend, do this, do that, rather than sort of wake up with that, hang on a second.
I'm on my own here.
I'm on my own here. Just because I'm quite a sociable person and I like to be with people. Other people probably would have found it a massive relief. It's just me.
Yeah, some people quite like that. But if you're a sociable person.
But it's just an adjustment.
Yeah.
Because you've gone from family life to just the two of you. And then when it's just you rather than the two of you, then that can be really interesting in terms of, you're almost, okay, what do I do now? Where do I go?
And people say that even sort of further down the line, that they get married and they've lost that social life, or they don't see their friends as much. I suppose especially if they've got busy jobs or children, but it is about making an effort to keep those those things in place, because it's important. That social network is important.
Absolutely. And the way, so again, linked with the identity work we do, we talk about experiences that we want to have in terms of our lives.
Okay.
So rather than just goals and things we want to do, the experiences and what qualities and characteristics we have to do those and that we need to do those.
Okay.
So it's very much about, even though two people have come together, actually still having your own identity, still being truly who you are, and being together rather than one under each other's shadow, or
absolutely
compromising in a way that, you know, of course it's about, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it, relationships, communication and that sort of thing, and making it work. It is though around still retaining your sense of self.
Yeah.
Still being who you are rather than becoming somebody else.
Yeah, and reliant on somebody else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's still having that inner strength and that inner core. And that's what that core identity, if you know who you are, then when you're with somebody else, you can still be you.
Yeah.
And whether that's with your partner, with your friends, and you can build your life rather than being dependent on somebody else.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think you hear that a lot of people that are no longer together, is that they lost sense of who they were, or their life they had as an individual. And you should always maintain that individuality.
Absolutely.
Throughout your married life.
Yeah, because you're still you.
Yeah.
Well,
there's a book, I think it's Whoopi Goldberg wrote a book called "If Someone Says You Complete Me, Run."
Yes,
and
I love it.
And the whole point being, if you're looking for somebody else to find something that you don't have in yourself or in your life, that's not a good starting point for a relationship. You should be whole and complete in yourself.
Absolutely. And the other side of that is, if you're going into a relationship thinking, well, I'll change that other person, equally, that doesn't work.
It's not going to work either.
Equally run. Because it is about actually, knowing who we are. I'm not saying that we don't have to be flexible. Of course we have to be flexible. But there's boundaries, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's boundaries of flexibility, and there's knowing who you truly are and who you want to be going forward and in that relationship, so you can still be authentic and still be your true self.
Yeah, and authenticity is really important.
Because at the end of the day, if you're trying to change for somebody else or they're trying to change for you, you might be able to do that for the first 6 months or whatever, but at some point that facade will drop.
Yeah, absolutely. Something's going to give.
At some point something's going to give, and you're going to go back to how you truly are. And then if you're not compatible with that person, it becomes interesting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also it was interesting what you said. You sort of felt alone when you've been with a lot of people, and then you hadn't planned things with friends to sort of that transition period.
Yeah.
But I think it's also about, you can have your partner and they can be your perfect partner, but they don't have to be all things all in one person. Absolutely. So when I moved away to be with my partner, so I left my friends and family and my job to be with James.
Yeah. Okay.
And looking back, I probably expected too much of James to fill the void of
to fill everything.
Friend and family and partner, and that was unrealistic. And I think our relationship strengthened when I did find my group of friends locally and my business, and I had loads of things going on away from James that he wasn't who I was looking at to sort of be my whole world and be everything to me.
I think that's a very important point, that if you're expecting your partner to be everything, then that's a big ask.
Yeah.
Actually, your partner's your partner.
Yeah.
They're not your everything, all your friends and all your family and all everything. It is that balance. They're very similar, actually, isn't it? You moved away, but still, it's the same thing. Of then expecting, and the pressure for that other person.
It's massive.
To do all of that.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Exactly.
Whereas, to have that. Okay, I've just moved status. I've just moved label. I haven't moved who I am.
Yeah.
And still have that.
Yeah, and it's
definitely,
different relationships have different dynamics. So now I would describe James as my best friend, and I do.
Yeah.
And we do have lots of fun and we have lots of laughter. There are relationships where your partner is your partner, but they wouldn't necessarily be someone you go on a night out with, and that happens a lot.
Yes.
You've got separate friendship groups and then come together and do coupley things or whatever, and it works both ways.
And I think that's a great point of, it depends on the individuals and it depends on the couples.
Yeah.
So I know people who work together and they do social stuff together and they do everything together.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Sean and myself don't work together.
No, no, James and I couldn't
don't
work together. No,
we're very different. Sean always says, "Oh, I wouldn't." Oh, no, we're very different. But that's great because then he has his world, I have my world, and we come together. And what we do together, or travel, and have loads of fun and all of that sort of thing. You guys round for dinner the other night, and all of this sort of stuff we do together, and we love. He doesn't have to be in every part of my life, though.
No.
That doesn't,
that's
just
really
because
healthy.
he isn't there doesn't mean to say he loves me any less or I love him
That's
any
really
less.
important to say, isn't it?
It's so important is that you don't have to be every second in each other's pockets to know that they still are the person that you love and that you want to be with.
I do find, makes me sound really old now, but like with younger people or with the dating apps, because I met James sort of pre-dating apps, we didn't meet on a dating app, definitely.
Yeah.
They
weren't invented when I met you. Apps, what are they?
It's so tick boxy that you're not giving people a chance to show their qualities and their skills.
Yeah.
So you've got people rejecting them because, I don't know, they don't like their hairstyle or they don't like that interest or they don't like those films.
Yeah.
And actually that's not what a relationship is about. It's not healthy. And there's a lot of people that are too picky, I would say, nowadays. There's a sweeping generalisation, but because they're expecting their partner to be everything, and that's not necessarily
and I
the
think
case.
that's the issue with those apps is all you've got is a visual and a few words, and you're not actually meeting them. So like we said, I met Sean in a car accident. Well, it wasn't his hairstyle or his car or his interest in films that I decided that, I fell in love with him. It was something about him, his personality, his
energy,
presence, his energy, his love, just the way he was. It was actually the first thing that I completely went, he just ran his hand through his hair in a particular way. Okay. And that was just me gone,
wow.
And that was the first time I met him. Yeah. Just crashed into his car. And that was what it was. Well, you can't get that on a picture.
No, you can't.
you can't get that on a description of like, by the way, this is how I do my hair. It's not like that.
No, not at all.
So it's because what we're talking NLP, visual, auditory and kinesthetic. So how we take in information. We also do it through smells and sounds. Yeah, so through our sights, our hearing and our feelings. And actually, when you meet somebody, you get that vibe, you get those feelings. You're also taking in the sounds, so what they're saying to you, what you're seeing, the whole thing around that person. You're having that full picture. Whereas when you're just seeing a picture of somebody on an app and reading a few words, no personality is coming out, really.
No.
It's limited. You're limiting it down to one source, so just your visual, rather than everything else.
Yeah.
So it makes it less than easy for people because they're just then judging just on what they've seen.
Yeah.
Whereas if that person has a natural preference in terms of auditory or kinesthetic, the sound of their voice or, how they are in terms of like feelings and that feeling that they give you, then those two senses are almost turned off.
Yeah.
So it's less than easy through those apps.
Definitely.
It's still possible.
Yeah,
absolutely. There's so many people that have met that way.
Yeah.
But you're right. There could be times where people have been.
I mean, James and I wouldn't have matched up on those superficial levels.
Sean and me, not either.
Because what we're into is not the same. What our values are very similar. We're very into our family.
Yes.
We're quite homely.
Yeah.
We're quite huggy and sort of very affectionate as people.
Yeah.
But that's not things that you sort of tick on a box.
No.
So that leads on to kind of setting goals as a couple and allowing each other to sort of work towards things together and separately. Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, so that's still linked with the personality thing and the identity thing of who you truly are. So I think it is important, yes, to plan and do things together, of course, absolutely. Also to have what you want out of life, those experiences that we were talking about. So what is it that you want to do together? and what is it that you want to do on your own. And this has been a journey for us to learn this, I think, and it's probably like that for most relationships. It's trial and error sometimes of giving it a go and doing things. So we do a lot of travel together, we do a lot of things together. I also do a lot of creative stuff, which that isn't Sean's world.
No.
But I'm not into MotoGP like he is. So that's great. So he has his things and I have my things.
Yeah.
And then when we come back together, then that's awesome, because we've got how different experiences that we bring back to actually enrich our relationship.
Absolutely. But it's being open and clear at the start of the relationship, and when you're engaged and planning that wedding, all the talk is about that one day, as you were saying. And it is about talking beyond that day. Well, what do we want in a year's time? Where do we want to be? You know, from the very basic, do we want children? Do we not want children? To, you know, you hear people down the line that, it sounds very negative. I don't mean to put you all off. Have a lovely wedding, everyone. You know, there's resentfulness that they gave up their career for the other person, or they, you know, or they couldn't pursue their passion of art, or whatever it is. And you need to have those conversations at this point if you're getting married.
Absolutely.
What is it that is important to you that you don't want to give up, or that you want to explore? And you don't always know. And life takes you on a journey, and loads of unexpected things happen. But it's good to have that understanding of what the other person wants from life.
And to have those experiences, and to have those goals that you have for you and joint ones. Because otherwise that's when you can lose your sense of self. When you give everything that you want up for that other person, then you become reliant on that other person. And then, you know, if they're not there, what do you do then? And that was what I did with the marriage. Right at the very beginning. This is why we wrote this stuff, right? Because with hindsight, you can look back and go, oh, okay, so I just expected everything from this. Whereas actually to have that balance, and just because that person isn't with you 24/7 doesn't mean they don't love you.
Exactly.
So just having that, it's okay that you have separate things and together things.
And it's recognising that, I think, because James comes from a different background to me. So my family weren't busy, but I always had a sibling, and I had cousins that I saw. James was an only child. So, you know, if there's a weekend that we couldn't see each other, it wouldn't bother him. Whereas for me, I was a bit like, oh, you're not bothered that you're not seeing me. You know, are you serious? Do you not miss me when I'm not there? But even if he did, he'd just get on with stuff, you know. Because that's what he's used to doing. Whereas now I'm really relieved, because when I'm working at weekends and doing a wedding, he's not sat there sad. He gets on and does what he wants to do. So actually it's a real bonus that's how he spends his time.
Absolutely.
And that he likes filling his time being busy. Otherwise we'd have a problem there. So but it's just knowing that and realising that, I know you've said before, like, how does the other person, or how do you know that you're loved? And that's quite important, isn't it?
It really is. And this comes back to the NLP communication model of how we process that information. Because we have filters that we filter information through, what they're called deletion, distortion, and generalization. So we take information in, and to get it from lots of information down to a manageable amount, we put them through filters. Okay? So we either delete bits that aren't relevant, we think aren't relevant, distort them to meet what we think should be happening, or generalise, it's one of those. So we use those filters, and those have been created through our background, our upbringing, our memories, our what we call meta programs, so things that are going on inside our minds, how we're feeling at that moment. All of these things create those filters. Okay, so our history, as it were, creates those filters. So then when that affects obviously the meaning, how we interpret what's happening, then affects how we feel about it, and then affects our behaviour and the outcome. So it's almost a chain reaction. So because those filters are so important, they're actually individual to you, because your background and my background is different. Every single person has had different experiences because those filters have been created over time. No one life is exactly the same.
No.
So we always talk from our, what we call the map of the world, from our communication side of things, and expect the other person to have exactly the same map.
Yeah.
And they don't. And that's the biggest learning when you're then... So this can happen with friends and all sorts. Have you ever had a time when, you just haven't quite seen eye to eye on something?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're then living with somebody or, moving in with them, get married, that's a real different situation in that person is then with you 24/7 almost. And you think they're exactly the same as you, but they're not.
No, and they're never going to be.
And so that realization of, okay, they're just different. They're not wrong. They're just different.
Yeah.
And one of the things we talk about in terms of communication is to have that flexibility so the relationship goes well, is to go around to their side first. Because we always expect the other person to come around to our side first. Yeah?
Yeah.
We have this presupposition in terms of NLP that says, communication is the response you get. Okay? So if it's not the response, the meaning of the communication is the response you get. So if the response isn't what you expected, most people go, well, I've told them, they should understand. What we say is, well, actually, we need to go around their side first to understand the interpretation of that.
Yeah.
Rather than mind read that they should know.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's interesting.
So just a really good tip to think about if things are getting a little bit, not that they will, obviously, I'm sure everyone's relationship is beautifully smooth. However, should it become a little bit tense, okay, hang on a second. Let me understand how you interpreted what I just said.
Yeah.
And then let me understand what that is. Okay, got it. So now come around my side and see what I meant.
Yes.
And now let's move forward.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll give you a quick example.
Okay.
Came home, it was a good few years back actually. And Sean I've been working late as per normal, got home, there's Sean cooking a curry, stirring a curry, chopping like the salad, doing all sorts of other stuff going on. I came in thinking I was helpful, walked over and gave the curry a stir. Okay. So you could imagine that could have been interpreted another way.
Yes, I can. Yeah, I can.
You can imagine that. And so rather than just like exploding, I turned around and said, "Well, hang on a second. What did you think I meant by stirring the curry? What did you think I meant?" And he said, "Well, clearly that I hadn't done it right." Yeah. And I was like, "Okay, I can see how that would be really annoying, and you would be annoyed by that." I didn't mean that. It was more from my perspective, I hadn't done anything to help and I was trying to be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. And so do you see what I mean? That we were just communicating a different frequencies almost.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? Our meanings were different. And then it was like, oh, okay, so I'm really sorry if that's what you felt. I didn't mean it.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, okay, that's fine. It's all good. And you can move through.
Yeah.
So it's just a really great tip of because we are different. We are all different. And if that happens, to stop and go, let me go around their side first and then come around yours.
Yeah. And I think for me, when I've realised that, is sometimes when you're watching something or film and your reaction or the side you take to what's going on is different to your partner's. And you're like, but the exact same thing is just played out in front of us. And we're both taking something different from it or interpreting. And that's when you realise how it's not objective, because you're relating it to your experiences and your history and something that's similar that you've been through. So that's a really good tip.
And it's the fundamental of NLP is that our experience is subjective.
Yeah.
Everybody's experience is subjective. There's no right or wrong. It's just our interpretation of that. And they have that you've heard the phrase, it's better to be, is it more important to be happy or to be right?
Yeah.
And actually, you could argue till the cows come home, is that going to be what you want?
Yeah.
Or actually accept somebody else's viewpoint and say, well, that's your view. This is my view. That's okay. We can still move on,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a fundamental one, I think, in terms of communication, to go around to that side.
And also similar to communication is how people show affection is different.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So we talked earlier about the visual, auditory and kinesthetic. You've obviously got the olfactory and gustatory, which is smell and taste.
Okay.
And we have natural preferences. We tend to, and again, it's a generalization, but most of us have a preference in some way of how do you know that you're loved? Yeah, so that was that podcast that we did.
Yeah.
And actually, if somebody is visual, they want to be shown.
Yes.
If somebody's auditory, they want to hear it. And if they're kinesthetic, they want to feel.
Yes.
So they want to have, cuddles and holding hands and that sort of thing. So if you know what your partner wants, then that's the one to use, right?
Yeah.
And so that again can really, really help in terms of, rather than having to do everything, because that can be exhausting, darling, you can just pick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
what do they want?
It must also be a shortcut almost to reconnecting again. So if you do have quite different goals, or you're leading quite separate lives at times from, whether it's career or whatever it is you're doing individually, if you know how to show them you're loved, it's going to save a lot of hassle. If you've just got that stolen weekend together, you can do those things that, if it's cooking a meal, or if it's saying it, or buying a present, or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
If you find out how they know that they feel loved, you can do that very quickly and, get back on track if you've had problems, or, if you do leave quite independent lives, you can come together as a couple again.
I completely agree. And this whole thing about the communication coming back together and the mind reading thing, we tend to think we're very good at it. Well, he should know how I feel.
Yeah.
Well, actually, maybe he doesn't. And, we expect our partners to be mind readers.
Yeah.
We expect them to know. Well, they're not going to, because they're not in your head.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness, yes. They haven't had all the experiences you've had.
No.
They haven't had what's gone on for you.
Yeah.
So actually, expecting them to do that is unrealistic.
Yeah.
And actually, slightly unfair even.
Well, yeah.
So to sort of then turn around and say, okay, let me understand where you're coming from, but also I would really like to explain where I'm coming from and how I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
And this is how this is making me feel. So that you can understand each other better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And support each other and have that better relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool.
Going back to identity a little bit, because we've talked about identity in terms of relating to each other as a couple.
Yeah.
Did you personally, or again, I don't want to be negative, but in terms of how other people relate to you when you become married? Or that change from Mr. Mrs., or if you change your name or don't change your name, what impact can that have on you and your relationships and your experience outside of the marriage?
Yeah, interesting. Yes, because there's expectations, isn't there?
Yes.
Potentially. We had a lot of expectations and in terms of how people thought that our lives were going to be. And it is interesting because I think, so my advice around this is know who you are at the core.
Yes.
And use that as your basis for decisions and the basis for moving forward. Okay. So if you know who you are and you know who your partner is at the core, and the bits that we were talking about in terms of those qualities that are really important, who you truly are, then actually what other people think and the way they treat you, that's actually their issue, not yours.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So a lot of times we take on what the world around us expect us to be.
Yeah, I was going to say it's almost, well, I'm married, so I should be doing this, or I should stop doing this because I am now
exactly
a married man or a married woman.
And my stock phrase for that is, according to whom? Exactly. And they go, well, they say, well, who's they?
Yeah, that is a good one. Yeah.
Who is they? We are all individual. Our lives, we didn't follow the stereotypical sort of got married, had children. We didn't have children. We decided we didn't want to have children. So that for us was like, people didn't get that.
No.
They didn't understand. And, it was like the expectation was, well, that's what you do, rather than, have a career or, travel or do other things. And so it's about you. And again, I wish I'd known more about NLP years ago, because things would have been different, because I would have been able to be stronger in terms of who I was, rather than getting impacted and affected by what I thought was the expectation and pressure.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it is our lives.
Yes.
Okay. It's sort of like the only person that's responsible for you is you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you know who you truly are at the core, then when these decisions and when these things happen and when people act and treat you in a particular way, you have the strength to say, right, okay, this is who I am. Not in an arrogant way, but in a truly grounded,
at peace
deep,
with yourself,
peace with yourself way, so that you can be resilient. Okay, it's the heart of resilience is identity, knowing who you are at the core. Okay, if you don't know who you are at the core, when things happen, I liken it to like a ping pong ball. Okay, so 1 minute somebody is nice and you're up there, the next minute says, oh, why haven't you got children? And you're down there, and you're sort of fluctuating. Whereas if you know who you are at the core, then you can come back in a way that's grounded, in a way that's like, okay, that's your view, that's your opinion, but I know who I am moving forward. It really does help. It helps in decisions, helps in resilience, in life.
Yeah.
To be honest, it really does.
Definitely, in terms of, it's interesting what you said about relying on external opinions, and then you're up when someone praises you and down when someone criticises. And I think there's so many of us, I'll include myself sometimes, that do that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so, I always say, NLP won't give you a perfect life. I wish it would. Otherwise, that would be rather marvellous. But what it can do is give you some tools so that when these things happen, you bounce back quicker.
Yeah.
So, because life happens, doesn't it?
I mean, I've had that recently where some people made some fairly innocent comments, but again, because they don't know my background and my history, it really knocked me down, and it shouldn't. But it really did.
And they may not have even meant it.
No. And they probably didn't, because thinking about what they said, if they truly meant how I interpreted it, they wouldn't have said it at all, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Without going into detail.
Going into detail. Exactly. And that's where we mind read that they mean something, but actually they may not have.
Yeah.
So what I say is, right, what goes on in your mind, you basically are making up. Apart from what you've got right now, what you're doing, if you think about your past, is looking at it through your own map of the world and your own filters.
Yeah.
Your own deletion, distortion, and generalization. That's how you're looking at the world. Okay? Anything that's going into your future, again, you are only looking at it through your own mind. Yeah?
Yeah.
You're interpreting. So if you're making stuff up, which is what you're doing, if you're thinking about anything in the future, if you're planning a wedding, you're making it up because it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
So it's all in your mind, okay? So what we tend to say is, make up good stuff. You're going to make it up. Yes, make up good stuff.
Yeah.
Make up that it's going to be awesome, that it's going to be amazing, and imagining it being incredible, and then notice how amazing it is when you get there. Because what happens, you've got a particular part of your brain called the reticular activating system, or your RAS for short, which is like I call it, like a little Labrador in your brain. That is a puppy that wants to please you. And actually, if you're putting out that you want it to be good and awesome and amazing, then that little Labrador, that little puppy, your RAS, will look for that for you and start to seek it out. It's the same thing as if you've ever bought a new car, jumped in, thought you've got I remember my first car, Purple Nova, marvellous, marvellous vehicle, jumped in, thought I was the only person in the world to have this, and every other person seemed to be driving a Nova. Ever found that?
Yeah.
It's because your RAS is seeking it out for you. It's exactly the same thing. So when you're thinking about these things, if you think about them how you want it rather than the negative stuff, then that's what your RAS will be looking out for you. Yeah?
Fantastic.
You've already created that neurological pathway. Yeah? Your mind muscles.
Oh, I like that.
Flex
those mind muscles as you plan your wedding.
Exactly, indeed.
Fantastic. So we've given lots and lots of tips about identity and just staying true to who you are. And if you're listening to this and getting married and you've had a few wobbles and stuff, just block out all the noise and just focus on who you are and what you want from life, and be open and honest with your partner. And if you're at this stage, I'd imagine you're along the same lines and you know what you want from life. But it is about what you want from life, not what you want from one day. And I say that in my book repeatedly. Plan things beyond the wedding that you're going to do together. What do you dream about? What are your shared goals? Because that's what's going to create a wonderful life.
Exactly.
You can have the best day in the world, but however great your wedding day is, and it will be great, it's not that will carry you forward into your marriage.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're spot on.
I'll finish there then.
Yeah.
I can't beat that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Absolutely. I mean, we had the most amazing wedding day. Our marriage has been even better though, right?
Yeah.
We still have our memories from the wedding day, but actually
it's the start of all the adventures.
The plans and the fun and the adventures and the excitement and even the doing nothing, snuggled in on the sofa.
That's some of the best memories.
The best ones. Snuggled in with the fire on, and just we popped downtown last 8 o'clock one day this week, and it was freezing cold and it was frosty on the floor, and we just wrapped up, like bustled downtown and back, and we just had a brilliant time. It was a half an hour walk, but it was amazing.
Yeah.
And
because you were together.
And you make those moments special. It doesn't matter whether you're cooking a curry, going for a walk, putting the bins out. It's about that. It's about being together. It's not necessarily just about the glitz and the glam.
Fantastic.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, thank you so much today, Emma. As welcome. Ever, you've been great. Inspiring and informative all at once. Don't know how you do it. It must be exhausting. If people are interested and think, NLP sounds like something I'd like to know more about, how can they find out more about you and
Absolutely.
NLP?
So my website is achieveyourgreatness.co.uk. On there, you've got lots of information. We do run an Identity by Design course. It's a one-day program. So if you are thinking, hang on a second, I wouldn't mind getting in contact with who I truly am before I move into a next stage of my life, then absolutely you can book on there. I do intro days and all sorts of information. So yeah, the website's the place to go. So www.achieveyourgreatness.co.uk.
Lovely. Thank you again. You can visit my website. It's all brand shiny and new.
I know, it's so amazing.
www.rosswilshirephotography.co.uk. It's so much quicker to say it than write it. I wish I had a shorter name and a shorter business type. It's a bit long-winded. So you can go to my website, and my book, How to Have a Wedding as Individual as You Are, is available on Amazon. But thanks again for listening. Thank you to Emma, and we'll see you next time for lots more information as you plan your wedding. Take care.
Fabulous. Cheers. Bye.